Millions of people have lost weight with personalized plans from Noom. Like Evan, who can't stand salads and still lost 50 pounds.
Salads generally for most people are the easy button, right? For me, that wasn't an option. I never really was a salad guy. That's just not who I am. But Noom worked for me.
Get your personalized plan today at Noom.com. Real Noom user compensated to provide their story. In 4 weeks, the typical Noom user can expect to lose 1 to 2 pounds per week. Individual results may vary.
Welcome all to Legends of the 70s podcast. Joining me in this episode is Forest legend, Mr. John Prescott McGovern. How are you, John?
Yeah, very well, thank you.
Who at the age of 19 became the youngest player to play in all 4 divisions of the Football League. That will never be achieved again, John, because now there's 3 divisions and we've got the Premier League.
Well, nice to hold a record that nobody else can beat.
You also held a record for holding the European Cup in 2 different decades, 79 for Forest and 80 for Forest. So well done, sir.
SRBMedia.
And while we're talking about Forest and winning European Cups, before we take a trip down memory lane, let's just dwell on that fact that you did win the European Cup twice in 1979 and 1980. So let's just briefly talk about that rivalry, Nottingham Forest versus Liverpool. And for the younger listeners, these are 2 of the greatest teams that British football has ever seen. And when I say that, between 1977 and 1981, Liverpool Football Club and Nottingham Forest Football Club owned the European Cup.
Yes, that was obviously a great achievement by both clubs.
Yeah.
Liverpool were recognised, I think, as the best team in Europe anyway. So we were a bit cheeky to go and pinch the league from them and then pinch the European Cup from them as well. But it was only on a temporary basis, although it lasted for a couple of seasons for us.
And Liverpool also won the league title in 1975-76, 76-77. Forest won it 77-78, Liverpool 78-79, and again Liverpool 79-80. You 2 teams didn't just conquer Europe, you owned the English First Division as well. What was it like playing in them big games, John? I hear people saying it was just another game, but Liverpool versus Nottingham Forest was not a normal game. I remember as a 12, 13-year-old kid being introduced into those battles.
Well, we were the new kids on the block.
Yeah.
You know, Liverpool with the established side. Shankly had put together, a team and continued to do so that we're going to conquer Europe and be, one of the outstanding teams in Europe. So when we came along, we weren't really recognised, I don't think. But to be fair, when we won promotion and then won the old First Division Championship, as they called it, by 7 points in our first season up there, I think people realised, no, this isn't just going to be a flash in the pan. And even when we managed to win the League Cup and then the European Cup in the same season, I think we were still not really or generally accepted. But of course, when you win the European Cup for the second consecutive year, people have to stand up and just say, no, this is a good side. And obviously Brian Clough and Peter Taylor, the management duo, did fantastic jobs in recruiting players and getting the best out of some of the players that were at Forest when they took over in the old second division. So, and the strange thing is that after we'd won the league the following year, we only lost 3 league matches, but Liverpool won the league. So it's a little bit like Liverpool and Manchester City this season. That close.
Absolutely. And when we talk about the older European Cup, I know we've got the Champions League these days, but you can finish in the top 4 places. In old money, in the European Cup, you had 42 preliminary games, if you like. That was your qualification to get into the European Cup. Unless, of course, you won the European Cup, as did Liverpool, as did Nottingham Forest. And that's why in the late 70s, we had 2 teams always vying for top dogs, not just in the First Division, but in Europe as well.
Well, it's misnamed now. They call it the Champions League. And
Yeah.
as you said, you don't have to be champions of your country to get into the competition. So they should have called it the Champions League when we were playing in it, and they should call it the European Cup now. And then you're being a little bit more accurate.
Absolutely. What was it like playing in those games, though, those big games? And I remember as a kid when Nottingham Forest won the league, they got into that European Cup. They were rubbing shoulders with the big boys, and I guess you were looking at going to the likes of Milan or going to Madrid, and you did draw out Liverpool in that first game, and you beat them 2-0. And one of your defenders scored what was it, the second goal? Gary Birtle scored a magnificent, latched on and scored the first goal. But to beat Liverpool 2-0 in that first game was something. And not only could you attack, you could defend as well, Forest.
Well, the strange thing is about that tie was that we were all waiting for the draw to be made, sat round a small transistor radio, and we're busy discussing between ourselves, the players, I fancy going to Italy. Oh no, I don't want to go to Italy. I want to go to France. I want to go to Germany. And then we find out we're not even leaving the country, and we're in a tournament called the European Cup, and we're actually playing against Liverpool. So there was a bitter disappointment, really, that we weren't going to be leaving the country and playing the European Cup in the first match. So, but obviously we managed to get over that and beat the European champions to make progress. So it was just quite ironic that it is the European Cup. It was our first appearance in it, and we weren't leaving the country.
And Liverpool must have thought not Forest again, because you'd beaten them in the 1978 League Cup final, and there was a bit of controversy in that game. John Robertson scored the goal from the penalty spot in the replay, but it was John O'Hare that got the penalty that wasn't actually inside the penalty box, but and it was given, and Robbo tucked it away, didn't he?
Yeah, he was very efficient, John Robertson, when it came to taking penalties. I think
Yeah.
in all the time he was at Nottingham Forest for years and years, I think he missed one penalty. Certainly when I was there, he only missed one. John O'Hare, as you said, got the penalty. He replaced myself because the match was a replay at Old Trafford. I got injured in the match at Wembley, the actual final. So for the replay, I wasn't fit. So John O'Hare took my place. So he made obviously a significant contribution with a little bit of help by a refereeing mistake. Referees do make mistakes. Players make mistakes, managers make mistakes, chairmen make mistakes. Everybody in the world makes mistakes. Why we can't just do away with VAR altogether and just accept that it's a human trait that people do make mistakes and just get on with it. But on that night, obviously, I'm sat in the stand and I'm jumping up and down like one of the supporters when the penalty went in, and then like all the other supporters, I was biting my nails waiting for the final whistle to see if we'd actually done it.
Absolutely. But making mistakes as well, let's just rewind slightly to May 1977. There was a game, an infamous game, last game of the season. Bolton Wanderers entertained Wolverhampton Wanderers. Wolves
Yeah.
won, and you guys got promoted in third place, and you were on the aeroplane over to Spain, wasn't you, when the pilot announced that Nottingham Forest were now promoted to the first division?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I can remember that season because our last home game was against Millwall, and unfortunately for him, the Millwall fullback headed into his own net to give us a 1-0 victory that actually put us in with a chance of being promoted. But we were on our way, as you said, over to Mallorca for an end of season break, and then we found out that the results had gone for us. And we'd actually won promotion. So ideally, when you're going away to sort of finish the season, the celebrations followed in good form, really, when we got over there. People said, "What did you do?" I said, "I can't remember."
Can't remember getting off the plane, but it was a stroke of luck and ingenuity that got Wolverhampton Wanderers that result, because there was a free kick. Willie Carr took the free kick and Kenny Hibbett scored, but Kenny actually touched the ball, so he activated it. The Bolton wall broke. Willie Carr feigned to hit the ball and then withdrawed it. Then he put it over and Ken scored. Now, on commentary, Gerald Sinstant said that was well rehearsed. I've spoken to Kenny Hibbett. He didn't. He made a mistake. And fine margins, he could have been ruled offside. He wasn't. But a goal that was ruled out for offside was from Neil Watmore, so Bolton could have got a 1-1 result there and Forest wouldn't have got promoted. It's all fine margins, John, and I think you're right. Let's do away with VAR and let's just have association football as it was meant to be in old money.
Well, you become big enough and decent enough as human beings then to realise, yes, people do make mistakes, and you shouldn't hold it against them. And in sport, there wouldn't be any results in matches, unless people make mistakes, miss a tackle, the keeper drops one, back passes intercepted and scores a goal. It happens all the time.
Yeah.
Why can't we be big enough as people and strong enough as people to say, listen, VAR, it slows the game down. There's even arguments that they still haven't got it right, even though it's a computer that is supposedly ruling whether you score or not. I think to judge whether the ball goes over the line of the opposition's goal, I think VAR should be used for that one, because sometimes when the ball hits the underside of the crossbar and goes down onto the goal area, it does go over the line. So for incidents like that are, the goal's a static thing, so, it's easy to see there whether the ball went over the line or not. Use it for that, most certainly. But in all other areas of the field, just accept the referee and accept what he says. Be big enough to accept that. Be strong enough and be intelligent enough to accept it. Because it'll happen to you and happen against you throughout the whole season.
Absolutely. Let's go back in time. Prescott, where did the name Prescott sit in between John McGovern? Is that a family name?
No. Obviously McGovern's my family name.
No, but sometimes they have middle names that go through generations, don't they? Whereas an uncle or a father, or etc., and it's a name that creeps up.
I think I was given the Prescott from a character in a book.
Okay.
That my dad had read. So it was just given the name. I didn't know the origin, but I think it was from a character in a book that my dad read. So that's where I think it comes from.
And the 28th of October 1949, 72 years young now, John. Born in Montrose, but you moved to Hartlepool, didn't you, when you was 7 years of age?
Yes, I did. Yep, 7 years. My dad moved down to find work, believe it or not, in Hartlepool in the northeast of England. We had some relations there. A couple of uncles lived there, and aunts lived there. So we ended up moving from Montrose because my dad wanted to find work, and we moved down there, and he found work. And obviously, I lost my dad when I was 11. He was working abroad in a place called Accra in Ghana, in Africa. He'd been away working for 2 years and then was coming home, and then was involved in an accident where he was killed, and he was the only casualty of the accident. So that was a big shock in our lives as a family, but you've just got to get on with life. And I can remember my mum, strangely enough, saying to me, "You don't have to go to school this afternoon." And I said, "No, I'm going back to school." And the funny thing was, when I went back to school, everybody knew my dad had been killed. And we just found out as a family about an hour before at home. So sad times. But then I think if my dad had been around, he wanted me to continue my schooling. My mum wanted me to continue my schooling. And strangely enough, when I first started playing football, and Brian Clough and Peter Taylor took an interest in signing me, my grandmother was staying with us in Hartlepool, and she persuaded my mum to let me sign for Brian Clough as an apprentice, when my mum wanted me to stay on at school and said, "Your dad did, so you're going to stay on at school." But thank goodness my grandmother was there, because she let me go into the footballing world.
Now, your grandmother had a big influence in your football, because you went up to stay with your grandmother in Bowness, and that's really where your footballing education started. You were a bright lad. You went to grammar school, John, didn't you? You played rugby and cricket at school and were captain of both teams.
Yeah, I did for 3 years, captain both, and wanted to be a tennis player. So it's strange how things work out. I'd actually was a big fan of Rod Laver, the Australian player. I thought, well, I would love to do that, and I was very keen on my tennis. But when my mum used to take me up to my grandmother's in Scotland and leave me there for the summer holidays and the Easter holidays and the half-term holidays, because she had to clothe and feed myself, my brother and my sister, so she used to leave me with my grandmother, and I took my cricket bat up with me and I took my rugby ball up with me, but none of the kids where my grandmother lived played either cricket or rugby. So next door garden, there's a game going on. The ball came over the fence. I kicked it back over to them, and they said, "Do you want to join in? We're playing 3-a-side, but there's only 5 of us, and you'll even the sides up." So I went over and played with them and had that much fun and enjoyed it so much because I was stuck at my grandmother's on my own, that I joined them day after day, and I think I played football with them every single day, and that was my first kind of taste of actually playing football. I mean, it was just in the garden, but we had some great fun, and the humour was marvellous. So the enjoyment was so good that when I was asked to play another little sort of just knockabout games up in Scotland in Bo'ness, I joined in those as well. And eventually, when I came back to Hartlepool and reached the age of 15, I joined a local team called Central Park that played in the Church League Division 2, and became friends with one of the players, Kenny Jessup, who remained one of my best friends until he passed away a few years ago. So that was literally where I first started to play, and I had one season in that junior football before obviously I signed apprentice terms for Brian Clough at Hartlepool.
What was that first meeting between you and Brian Clough? Peter Taylor was with him as well at Hartlepool, wasn't he? So they were both young men. I think Brian was probably 29, 30 maybe when he took on that Hartlepool's job.
Well, that was his first position,
Yeah.
management, and he was as forthright and outspoken as he always was. First time I met him, he told me to stand up straight and get my hair cut, because I look like a girl. This is in the 60s, of course.
Yeah.
When the Beatles and the Rolling Stones are making headway in the pop music business, and I fancied myself as the next Mick Jagger if I made a career out of singing songs. So I tried to grow my hair and look like him, but Mr. Clough was very much against long hair in those days. So eventually, I always had a running battle with him about my hair, because I did want to wear it long. But he was exactly the opposite, and we had a kind of running battle for years and years until a few years later at Derby, I just decided, I'm going to change, and I got it cut down to almost a head cut, which he gave me a strange look at once he spotted that. But that was only I'd gone from one extreme to the other.
Now, you've played for Brian and Peter for 4 different teams. Hartlepool's was your first. You moved down to Derby, but you didn't just move down to Derby. You moved the family down so you wouldn't be homesick. You played at Leeds United and then, of course, Nottingham Forest. We'll get on to those later. But Derby County, what a team they were. And you won the Football League Championship with Derby County, didn't you?
Well, it was a fantastic move, really, because Clough had left Hartlepool to manage at Derby. It was a year before he actually signed me. But in that year, we won promotion at Hartlepool for the first time in the club's history. So it was a fantastic honour, to win promotion at Hartlepool, because I think the previous few years they'd had to apply for re-election, a system where if you ended up in the bottom 4 or something, you had to actually reapply to get into the league. There were no other leagues. It was when I moved down to Derby, they were in the running for promotion from the 2nd division. So I'd left Hartlepool in the 3rd division. So I ended up graduating from like League 4, League 3, League 2 and League 1 in the space of 2 years through Hartlepool's promotion, and then obviously Derby County's. But when I managed to break into the Derby side, I didn't break in immediately, but I managed to break into the side. But I'm playing with people like Dave Mackay, who was, former Tottenham and Scotland player, and he was a fantastic influence on me. And there were lots of other good players there. John O'Hare was there, and Kevin Hector, Roy McFarland. They had Willie Carlin, an ex-Liverpool player who was very, very good player. Alan Hinton, Alan Durbin. Colin Bolton, the goalkeeper. So we had a fantastic team at Derby, and I think we won the league by about 6 or 7 points or something for the old 2nd division. So my first season there, I ended up getting a medal for getting promoted.
Heroes growing up, John. You've mentioned your tennis hero, Rod Laver. Who are your football heroes?
Well, I used to keep a scrapbook of Jimmy Greaves and Dennis Law because, like every young player, when you first start playing, you want to be a goal scorer because they get all the glory. And then I think that's always been the case.
Yes.
They always get more headlines than anyone else. So, but I knew from an early stage I was never ever going to be a striker. I didn't have the absolute ability or build to be successful as a striker. But at Derby County, to be part of that side, I mean, that was the first. I mean, at Hartlepool, it was great to have won promotion for the first time in the club's history. But I mean, Derby County were a bigger club, obviously. And then when we get into the top league, we're playing against, the Tottenhams, the Liverpools, the Manchester United. So we really are in the big time. And it was a massive step up. And in the space of 2 years, I'd played in all 4 divisions of the Football League, as you said, and was the youngest player to do that.
And that Derby County team was a fabulous team. Done quite well in Europe as well. Sadly, I think you were cheated. I think Brian Clough said, what was it, Juventus out of a game, and
Well,
he weren't very happy with the in the press room after, was he?
Well, as a player, I couldn't believe that a referee could be as biased as the referee was that night when we played against Juventus. I mean, I looked around. We've got television cameras there. We've got the press there. And the referee made it so obvious. It was almost embarrassing.
Yeah.
The first 2 players that we had booked, I think, were Roy McFarland and Archie Gemmell. They were the only players that had yellow cards, had been booked in the previous rounds, which meant that they missed the replay. So, it was just so obvious that the referee was biased. And it's the only match I've ever come off, and I was nearly in tears because I couldn't believe he could get away with that. Not so blatant. So really upsetting, because we got to the semi-final at the first attempt, knocked out Benfica, who the great Eusebio plays for, on our path to trying to get to the final. And, we didn't manage to make it, but it was just incredible how a referee could just give every decision in the book to the opposition in front of television cameras and reporters, and they got away with it.
Absolutely. There is press coverage of that, and if you go onto YouTube, there is one when Brian Clough walks in there and says, "I'm not talking to you because you're a cheating bunch of," and then walks out. Well, that was Brian Clough. He just said exactly what he thought. He didn't hold no punches. He then walked out on Derby and ended up, Brighton and then Leeds United, didn't he?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, there was obviously a fallout between the chairman, and when he left the club, I think the chairman had kind of called his bluff, really, because I don't think Clough really wanted.
Did you know 1 in 2 women wear the wrong foundation? Matching foundation is hard, but Il Makiage makes it easy. Take the Power Match quiz to find a better match in seconds, customized for your unique skin tone, undertone, and coverage needs. With 600,000 5-star reviews, this best-selling foundation is going viral for a reason. Available in 50 shades of weightless natural coverage. And with Try Before You Buy, you can try your full size at home for 14 days. Just pay shipping. Take the quiz at ilmakiage.com/quiz. That's ILMAKIAGE.com/quiz.
Millions of people have lost weight with personalized plans from Noom, like Evan, who can't stand salads and still lost 50 pounds.
Salads generally for most people are the easy button, right? For me, that wasn't an option. I never really was a salad guy. That's just not who I am. But Noom worked for me.
Get your personalized plan today at Noom.com. Real Noom user compensated to provide their story. In 4 weeks, the typical Noom user can expect to lose 1 to 2 pounds per week. Individual results may vary.
To leave. He wanted to get things his way, but the chairman was a very strong character. Sam Longson was his name. And he said, well, if you said you want to leave, Brian, you're leaving. And that was it. I'm sure Clough regretted it. And the players had 1 or 2 meetings to see if there was any way possible to get him back to the club. But once the chairman had made up his mind, that was it. and eventually, as you mentioned, he went down to manage at Brighton with Peter Taylor again, obviously, and then went to Leeds United, which seemed quite strange because he'd been very critical of them for the style of play that they had. And obviously, when he first arrived at Leeds United, I heard from Norman Hunter that the statement he made, cheated to win these medals, you can throw them in the dustbin, actually was said by Clough. And I said to Norman Hunter, I wish you'd have phoned me up and told me, Norman, I wouldn't have bothered coming. I was treated like a leper at Leeds.
Yeah, you
Leeds
were, weren't
United.
you?
Not a nice experience.
No, it was a strange club for Brian Clough to go to, but I've spoken to and interviewed both Johnny Giles and Alan Clark, and both were of the opinion, or certainly Alan Clark was of the opinion, that Brian Clough was the right man, but at the wrong time. All that he said, and said a lot more. But he wanted to go into Leeds because he thought that he could win the league and win the league better than Don Revie, who'd left to go and take the England job. But he did take you, he took John Maher, I think he brought in Duncan McKenzie. And you're right, the amount of abuse that you received was absolutely horrendous. Now, because Brian had took you and John O'Hare from Derby County, that wasn't your fault. You were just, as a professional footballer, doing a job. That stick that you got, I was talking to Steve Daly not long ago about his Manchester City days. He got horrendous stick as well. Sometimes the fans just go overboard, don't they?
Well, I've actually had one or two Leeds fans since that have apologised
Yeah.
to me face to face and said, I do apologise, but I was one of the ones that was booing you, when you made your debut at Leeds. But they say that what goes around comes around. So every time I go back to Leeds United now, I wear my European Cup winners.
Luckiest.
Because they've not seen one of those.
They haven't, but they was also cheated out of that 1975 final, as well as they were cheated out the 1973 final against Milan. English clubs in Europe, before we conquered it, were cheated out, but then we actually owned European competitions, so that was the difference. Luckiest and unluckiest grounds, John, that you played on?
I'm not sure if there was like luckiest grounds, but of course you want to play at the Old Traffords.
Yeah.
You want to. I mean, when I was at Derby County, we had one of the smallest pitches, believe it or not, in the old First Division, and Arsenal also had one of the smallest pitches in the old First Division. So I just used to like to play on the ground when it was full.
Yeah.
I mean, you go to Liverpool in those days, an hour before kickoff, you go out to test the surface, and see what studs you want to wear or what boots you want to wear, and the Kop in Liverpool was full an hour before kickoff. So there were fanatics at Liverpool, and a really big city club. Derby County are not really a big city club. Nottingham Forest are not really a big city club in the same context as when you're talking about the Manchester clubs or the London clubs like Chelsea and Tottenham. Obviously, Liverpool and Everton, along with the Manchester, are the big clubs. But obviously, at my time at both of those clubs was very successful, so it was most enjoyable.
If you could replay a game that you played in, John, what game would it be and why?
Replay a game?
Yeah.
I can't really put my finger on one game, but there are obviously certain games when things didn't go for you. I don't think it would have made any difference because of the referee if I mentioned the Juventus game when I was at Derby. But I think probably the Southampton League, not the Southampton, the Wolves Cup League Cup final against Wolves. Yeah. Because we obviously beat Liverpool over 2 games to win it, and then we beat Southampton, and our 3rd consecutive League Cup final was against Wolves, and we lost 1-0, and we really were a bit flat that day. I think if Wolves played us 10 games, we'd probably win 9 out of 10 against them in those days. But that was the one game, and it's at Wembley, and people says, well, you still make it to Wembley, so it's not a sad feeling. If you lose at Wembley, it's a horrible feeling. I'll tell you, when you lose a football match as a professional, but especially at Wembley on such an occasion where you want to please the fans and your family who've all come to the match.
And such a calamitous goal as well.
Yeah, it's a mistake. You see, there's a mistake.
Absolutely, yeah.
But we just had to suffer it and get on with it.
Yeah, Andy says it was the most difficult goal that he ever scored.
Well, he's got a sense of humour.
He certainly has. If you could revisit one season during your playing career, what season would you like to go back to and why?
Well, I think it would be that first season
Yeah.
at Forest where we just won promotion. We were the underdogs in the division. We didn't quite know what was going to happen. But Brian Clough made 3 sensational signings in Peter Shilton, Archie Gamble and Kenny Burns. Now, those 3 would be recognised as automatics, for Scotland, and Peter Shilton holds the record number of caps playing for England, 125 caps, So you look at those 3 added to the team that had come up that was hungry for success and keen as mustard. And we went into that first season, I think, with no fear. We played with no fear because there were no expectations on us. So that was, I'd like to go back that, but most of my career was enjoyable anyway. Created history at Hartlepool, winning promotion for the first time. Derby won second and first division medals, and then at Forest went even better than that. So I had a very, very fortunate time in football, and I just appreciated being around. And you could say it was a little bit of luck with my grandmother persuading my mum to let me become an apprentice at Hartlepool, and obviously Messrs Taylor and Clough looked after me in a sense by employing me at 4 different clubs, and they were the up and coming heroes of the day to the supporters because they got results very quickly with the clubs that they joined.
You got a great result at Goodison Park as well, first game of the season. And you was also
We did.
going to get a bollocking, wasn't you, off Browne until there was a knock on the door?
Yeah, that's right. And the strange thing was that Brian Clough, being as outspoken as he was, he wouldn't let anybody come in the dressing room, especially just after a match. Nobody is allowed in there. It's sacrosanct, So when he said, "Oh, please come in."
To listen to the rest of this podcast, please go to www.patreon.com/SRBmedia or just follow the links in the description. Thank you.